Welcome to Raven Talk, the official podcast of the Raven Tribe. The Raven Tribe is a home for warriors on the path, and is dedicated to training warriors for the battlefield of life. Visit us on the web at theraventribe.com, where you can learn more information on membership, warrior training, as well as links to our official YouTube channel, Facebook group, apparel store, and our official bookstore, Marshall Books.
Welcome back, Tribe. Today we're here with special guest Robert Mitchell, and we're going to be discussing Hermeticism and its link to modern martial arts. Mr. Mitchell, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, glad to have you on. So, Mr. Mitchell, for the benefit of the audience at home who may not be familiar with you, can you please give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got involved in martial arts, and how you got involved in Hermetic philosophy, and kind of bring us up to today, where you're at today in your career?
Great. Well, it kind of started in martial arts back in the 80s. I actually started training in Taekwondo in 1986. And I did that because I was having issues with my weight and with my attitude. And I had heard that martial arts were really good for exercise and that people learn discipline from that. So I got involved in Taekwondo, and then I guess I got my black belt in 89, and then I was an instructor for City of Richmond Recs and Parks until probably 2000. Also for the YMCA through those times in inner city locations. And then I had to move away for a job. So when I came back, I sort of had a series of realizations and epiphanies, and of course the mixed martial arts craze was on. And so when I came back to Richmond, I decided to branch out. And so from there I started taking classes and other things, and started taking seminars from guys like Mark Hatmaker and stuff like that. And I worked my way through that, and eventually I ended up doing some full contact shoot fighting and some other things. And through all that, I just basically decided it was time for me to start a new martial art that incorporated some of the things I saw missing in modern martial arts.
Now, Mr. Mitchell, can you tell me what some of those missing elements were that you identified?
Well, what I felt what I saw was the increasing focus on reality in martial arts, and I thought that was wonderful. And I thought this is fantastic. We're not going to live in a dream world anymore. We're going to really get down to the things that work. But at the same time, I saw a lack of sacredness, a lack of spirituality in the martial arts, and that seemed to be sort of falling away in direct proportion to the increase in realism. And what it kind of reminded me of was really the definition of mysticism, which Evelyn Underhill is the definitive author on mysticism. Her book, 1911 book, Mysticism, is the book on the subject. And in that book, she describes mysticism as the attempt to apprehend ultimate reality. Not to check out, but to check in, to be present. And so I thought, well, if we're going to try to be fully present in the fighting, shouldn't we try to fully be present in reality and be able to fully experience what it means to be humans and to be alive, if that makes any sense?
Absolutely, and it's an interesting concept. Now that leads me to my next question. You have blended martial arts techniques with a philosophy that is not normally thought of when one thinks of martial arts. Eastern philosophy is very prevalent in many different forms of martial arts, but you actually chose to incorporate Western Hermeticism. Now, for the audience that may not be familiar, can you give us a little bit of background on what Hermeticism is and what are some of the key tenets of the philosophy?
Well, it's really interesting that you mentioned the fact that the martial arts tend to be associated with Eastern philosophy. Yeah, that's true. But ironically enough, I think it was Alan Watts, the famous philosopher Alan Watts, who said that, and he was a Zen Buddhist for the most part, well, a Buddhist definitely, and he called Hermeticism Western Zen. Hermeticism is, there's a million definitions, but for me, Hermeticism is the philosophy of symbol. And it really, Hermeticism presupposes that there are certain universal truths that are really accessible to anybody, anywhere, anytime, regardless of their language or their culture, through symbol. And, it's like if you've done martial arts long enough, you know that, when your hand falls into a figure 4 position, that's pretty universal. I mean, you can call that a chicken wing, you can call that a kimura, you can call that, a top wrist lock. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it, but that figure 4 is a symbol that resonates with anybody who's ever wrestled. So, symbolically, symbols are wonderful for spiritual development because I don't have to sit here and preach. I don't have to tell you what to believe. I don't have to say, well, this is right, this is wrong, this is moral, this is immoral. I can just say to you, what I think we should do is why don't we meditate on the symbol of, the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail means a million different things to a million different people, right? But if we all meditate on that symbol, it's amazing how universal and how touching that symbol can be to almost anybody from any walk of life. And they can learn something from the meditation on the symbol.
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to ask you, Mr. Mitchell, the symbols, how do they come into play in your instruction of students? Is it something that you spend a lot of time on? Is it something that students are meant to do a little bit more self-study with? How does it play out in your system?
Well, we use symbols because, first of all, to answer your question more directly, we usually spend, like a lot of schools usually have about an hour-long session. Our sessions are about an hour and a half, and we typically will spend about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of each session doing something internal, some sort of internal work. I mean, that could be meditation or moving meditation or contemplation, or we might be meditating or discussing some of these symbols. One of the things that we do is we journal. So a lot of us keep journals. So we're able to discuss, our own personal journeys and our own personal discoveries that we've made on our own too. But it's not uncommon for us to pick a symbol for the month and just explore that symbol, for the course of a training month. We have training focuses. We usually take about a month on a training focus. So we'll have a physical training focus or an external training focus, and then we'll have an internal training focus, and then we just sort of, it's amazing how you'll find relationships between those two things as you go on. Meditating on symbols and coming to understand symbols is beautiful for martial artists because, if you have to defend yourself, you don't have 20 minutes to sit here and think about what your next movement is. It needs to be instinctual. And a spiritual system that's based on symbol is wonderful too. It teaches your mind to work in a way that's more instinctual, and the two sort of blend. So, for example, if like we're talking about with the figure 4, you see this symbol, this 4, and to you, like in your mind, you don't even have to have your eyes open. When you feel your hand on another man's body in the course of wrestling, once you place the 4, you know your relationship to him and your relationship to his body and his to yours, and which way to turn in order to lever that. And if you explore symbols in your meditation and your spiritual life, when you're faced with a decision in a moral decision or an ethical decision in your real life, you've absorbed that symbol. You've taken that symbol into yourself, and it's readily accessible instinctively the same way that your martial training should be readily accessible to you in your physical fight. At least that's the way I see it. And I realize that sounds extremely metaphysical and maybe silly to some folks, but that's how we look at it.
Now, Mr. Mitchell, it's obvious that you had a goal in mind here with training individuals at a level that was different than just a physical level. It sounds like you put a lot of thought into what you're doing here. And I'd like to ask you, when you established this program, what were some of your concrete goals? I mean, what did you want to instill in students? What did you want to get across? And what are some things that maybe you found as a secondary benefit of doing the training this way?
Well, I've had to grope my way through this a little bit, because when I started it, all I knew is that I knew that the martial arts had a great potential to help people and to make people stronger and to really help them transform. And what I really started with was a set of initiations, and these initiations, we call them trials, are things that I had put myself through over the course of years. And I said, well, we've got some symbols that seem to work, and we've got some trials or initiations that worked for me. And let's start putting guys through these, and let's start training people. And I started trying to do this with a group called Richmond All Martial Arts Club back in the early 2000s. And that lasted for a short time, and then interest sort of petered out in that. And then I moved on to another group called the Martial Arts Mysticism and Occult Group, and we met out at Bryan Park here in Richmond for some time, and I met a few guys there that seemed to share my views. And so we started experimenting, and some of the stuff just grew organically over time. But what we really started with was really the trials, the initiations, the basic symbols. If you go to cabalfang.com, or if you have looked at some of the books, you know that we've got this thing we've got this obsession with the hourglass, and I can talk about the hourglass in a little more detail. But I guess the main thing that was our focus was transformation. How can we take people who have no direction, who are out of shape, who are shy, who are picked on, who are afraid, who can't stand up for themselves physically or verbally, and transform them completely into new people? How is that done? How do we achieve that? And more importantly even than that is, how do we get them to come out? How do we convince them that we can do this and we can help them? And how do we make them come out here to the park and sweat? That's the next question.
So you have some elements of spiritual alchemy going on here.
No question about it. And we've got a couple of guys at the club that have got about 8 or 10 inches of belt that's loose hanging because they've lost so much weight out at the club. We've got guys that are completely different than when they started. I got to tell you though, it's just tough because if you do martial arts properly, they're just not easy, and some people just wash out. But if you make it too hard, you'll lose them. If you make it too easy, it doesn't work. So, you can't make it suit the lowest possible denominator, or you'll just be doing shopping mall martial arts. So it's tough. I mean, it's a balancing act. So.
Now, Mr. Mitchell, what can you tell me about the trials? Can you give me an example of some of the trials that you use to help people grow?
Well, the first trial is the only one we really talk about publicly. For a lot of reasons, we keep those secret because we don't want them to lose their impact. But the first trial is a physical fitness trial that we call the constitutional trial, and we usually administer that trial after about 90 days. And during the course of that trial, the person really is required to push themselves pretty much point of their furthest point, physical fitness-wise. And we do everything that we can to make sure that the trial stays safe and that people don't push themselves, past the point of where it's healthy. But I can tell you to a man that the guys that attempt that trial have a very high success rate, and they'll tell you that it changed them, that they transformed through it. Any good initiation has a separation phase and it has a testing phase, and it has an integration phase. And, when you bring a guy out, and you can tell him in advance what it's going to be like, and you can read about it in the book, but when you step into the circle, and there's 10 or 12 stern-faced guys watching you, and you have to execute that physical fitness test per the instructions, and everybody's staring at you sternly, watching you do it, you can't pace yourself. You can't breathe right. You find yourself, overexerting yourself early and going too fast, and then you gas. And then you're halfway through it. And then you got to try to find a way to get your wind back and make it through that sucker. At the end, when you're done, and then all of a sudden the stern faces of the crowd, are smiling and hooting and hollering and hugging you, and you're reintegrated with the group after having been separated and tested. It's a profound experience that the guy that sticks with them. There's no question about it. But I keep saying guys. We really haven't had a lot of female interest, sadly. We do have a couple of females that are coming out regularly now, and I really hope they stay. So.
Now, sir, apart from you mentioned meditation and contemplation, you talked to us a little bit about the trials. What are some of the other elements involved with the Hermetic aspect of the art?
Well, I think, that's a tough question. When we talk about Hermeticism, we discuss symbols a lot, as I said at the club. Hermeticism, the ideal Hermeticist to me is Dr. John Dee. And those on the podcast listening who know about John Dee, he was one of the world's most famous Hermeticists. And, at that time, he was a mathematician. He was a Euclidean geometry guy who pioneered navigation, did a lot of stuff involving that. If it hadn't been for Dr. Dee, who was also the Queen's astrologer, we probably wouldn't have had the Age of Discovery and all the great British explorers who founded all those colonies back in the day. In fact, there might not have been a new world discovered. In any event, John Dee wanted to profoundly change the world, and one of the ways he wanted to do it was he wanted to unite the world and overcome religious separatism. Religious separatism is a big problem in the world today, and it's really, sectarianism and violence between, religions is a serious problem today. This is a big problem to him in the 14th century. He was really onto something back then, and he wrote a book called Monus Hieroglyphica, and in that he devised a symbol. And that symbol, he had hoped he could unite the world under the hieroglyphic monad, or really what that translates to in English is the symbol of the one. And he had hoped that we wouldn't fight about our differences and that we'd unite behind that. He's the emblem of what a Hermeticist would be. And if you think about what Hermeticism means, what it comes from Hermes. Hermes is the god of the great communicator between God and man. Hermes is the Greek god, of course, with the staff of Hermes. And he was a reconciliatory figure, someone who brought people together. And I can't really think of anything better for a martial artist to do than to try to be a reconciliatory type of person, to try to bring together opposites, to try to unite people and bring people together. And I can't think of a better type of martial artist to entrust violent and dangerous skills to than to someone who was a Hermeticist, because a Hermeticist is someone who wants to bring people together, who wants to communicate, and who wants to overcome differences, not to accentuate them.
Now, Mr. Mitchell, I'm sure that people listening to the podcast that are not familiar with Hermeticism may run to to Google or Wikipedia, and they're going to run Hermeticism through it, and inevitably what's going to come back at them is going to be a lot of historical figures and references to magic, and I want to talk about that a little bit because one of the arguments that I've heard regarding Hermeticism is that it is not magic in the sense of Harry Potter. It's not that type of thing. It's not somebody practicing witchcraft or any type of other magical work in that sense. But it's really a form, a very I don't want to say primitive, but an earlier form of almost psychotherapy or self-work. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think you're really onto something there. I mean, that's what alchemy is, and that's what Hermeticism has its feet, firmly set in alchemy. You have to think about where Hermeticism came from to really get it. Well, first of all, let me address your magic thing, your magic question. That's only because of the only reason Hermeticism is associated with magic, I think, is mainly because of the Emerald Tablet. And the Emerald Tablet is a beautiful, beautiful piece of mystical poetry, and it's deeply symbolic. And it was really latched onto by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in the late 19th century. It was latched onto by Aleister Crowley too, the great beast. And so, and then one phrase from the Emerald Tablet, as above, so below, or to paraphrase it, and that was used to justify symbolic magic or sympathetic magic. And for a lot of people, magic today is, for millions of people, it's still a way of life. And Wiccans love magic, and that's a different topic. I have no problem with it. But that's really why the word Hermeticism, I think, gets unified with magic so closely. But what Hermeticism should be more closely aligned with runic stuff and Masonic initiation and that sort of thing. Hermeticism really came about in Alexandria, in late antiquity, around the 200 BC area, and there were a lot of philosophies and religions all together there. The Egyptian paganism and Platonism and Stoicism, and those are our podcast people here listening who like Mark Hatmaker will love to hear the word Stoicism thrown in. But anyway, it's all in there. There was even Greco-Buddhism. Most don't even know there's such a thing, but there was Greco-Buddhism that existed at that time. All that stuff was together in that melting pot in Alexandria at that time, and it persisted until year zero. And we have the introduction to Christianity and so forth, and that's where Hermeticism came from. And it really sort of went away for a while, and then it really came back during the Age of Enlightenment. And then there was Freemasonry, and the Freemasons really took it, and they expanded on it. If there wasn't no Hermeticism, I don't think we would have seen the same sort of character to the American Revolution or to the French Revolution. Marquis de Lafayette and Washington and Franklin, all those guys, Voltaire, they were all Freemasons. And all of that fed into the Golden Dawn in the late 19th century. And of course, we know all the great Golden Dawn guys: W.B. Yeats, poet laureate from Ireland, and Aleister Crowley and Arthur Machen and Maud Gunn, and all those guys or gals, Maud Gunn. But anyway, so I think associating Hermeticism with magic, that's okay, I guess, but that kind of misses the point. And the point was, all these guys wanted to build a better world. They all wanted us to get along, to overcome our differences, to evolve, personally and as a species, to become more, to become greater.
Now, let me ask you, we haven't even mentioned, properly the name of your system. What is the name of your system?
Well, we call it Cabal Fang, and we did that for a couple of reasons. Cabal, obviously, Cabal comes from secret or hidden, and that actually comes through Judaism, through Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical system, which has a huge following inside the Hermetic community. So Kabbalah means a secret, right? And then Fang, we use the word Fang because that's a really complicated origin, but it implies a grip or to be gripped. It comes from Scottish, and it refers to a pen or a cage for animals. And so, obviously, because of this modern martial arts association with a cage or a pen, we wanted to have a deeply symbolic word that almost could have been Asian, possibly. So you have this word Cabal Fang. So could it possibly be Asian? Could it be Western? What could it possibly mean? It doesn't really have a concrete meaning per se. We just picked words that could be interpreted many, many different ways, and that could or maybe not be, Western words, could be Asian words. And we've gotten a lot of interest just off of a name that inspires people to wonder about things. And we like it when people wonder about things, because wonder is one of our most, in our club, is really the most important characteristic we think people should have about the world they live in, is a sense of wonder about, how do things work, what is this, what is that. That childlike sense of wonder is what really draws us forward in our lives towards new discoveries and experiences. So that's really why we picked such a quirky name, was because we kind of wanted to inspire people to wonder what it was and what it meant.
Well, you definitely got me wondering, and I'm also wondering about the hourglass. What can you tell me about the hourglass symbology?
Yeah, I would love to, because a lot of people ask me that. So first of all, and by the way, while we're just talking, you got my attention because you like the raven, and we like the raven too. The raven's a wonderful symbol, and as really a carrion bird, or a bird that persists after battles are fought, won and lost. It doesn't. So you could have used a vulture, right? But that doesn't conjure up the same image. So you have a carrion bird that actually has some nobility about it. So that's what's really cool about crows and ravens, is that although they are scavengers, they're also super intelligent, and they have a noble character. So I love that raven, and I'm glad you picked it. I like it. We like it too. But no, the hourglass takes us right back to John Dee. And when I was mentioning that John Dee came up with his universal symbol that he called the hieroglyphic monad, he divides the symbol by combining several different smaller symbols into one. Now, here's the question. Where did he get the graphemes, or the little partial symbols that he brought together to put into his symbol? Well, what he did is that he took two cones, and he put one cone above the other connected at the points. And what he figured out after reading Euclid's books about sectioning cones was that if he sectioned these cones, in other words, if he took an imaginary knife and he sliced down through these two cones, wherever they intersected, they would create certain shapes. So, for example, if he came down sort of at an angle through one of the cones, he could get an ellipse or an oval shape. And if he came across it at a 90-degree angle, he would get a perfect circle. If he cut the two cones where they intersected, he would get a dot or a point. And if he cut them straight down to the top, he could get two inverted triangles. And this is important because if you look about this online, physicists study this, and at the time, the only way that you could do certain forms of calculus wasn't invented yet, but that you had to section cones in order to get graphs. If you're familiar with mathematics and doing parabolas, and you remember your high school geometry, that's how you get a parabola, is to section a cone at an angle, and you can use that to do calculations if you don't have a computer. Well, in the course of John Dee doing that, for mathematical purposes, to do charts and navigation and to create round maps of the Earth, he saw those symbols and he put them together. And one of the things he found out is that all of the astrological symbols that you know of, like the Gemini symbol, the two arcs side by side, etc., all those astrological symbols are constructed from the basic graphemes that you get by sectioning cones. So the two cones stacked on top of each other really look a lot like, guess what, an hourglass. And that hourglass symbol is pervasive. So if you read the mystical works of Meher Baba, the famous Hindu mystic, he talks about those two cones and about how that's a model of the universe and how it works. And then if you read W.B. Yeats's book, A Vision, he talks about how that's the way the universe looks mystically. The human mind expands upward and upward until it reaches a point, and then it expands beyond that again into the next life, into the next reincarnation. So that universal symbol of the two intersecting spirals of the hourglass shape is a pervasive mystical symbol that cuts across many different religions and many different mystical ways of looking at things. And it's a scientific symbol that is important in terms of understanding the physical aspects of the universe and how it works. So we picked it because of for all those reasons.
Now, Mr. Mitchell, let me ask you this. Thank you for sharing some insights as far as how Hermeticism can help the individual when they undertake it in the training. And it seems like it's a great venue or a great way of focusing on oneself and improving oneself. What type, if any, insights has Hermeticism lent itself to in the form of practical martial arts application? Have you been able to find anything in the philosophy that translates to the physical application of martial arts?
That's interesting. I mean, and I don't want to sit here and be negative about the martial arts because God knows it's central to my life, and I actually love martial arts. But if you look at it statistically about what martial arts are for, I mean, what do they do? What's the point? The average person, at least in the United States, only has about a 50% chance of ever having to use martial arts skills. And I hate to use the phrase because it's overused, but quote on the street, unquote. And so I really want to say, does it have a physical application? I mean, that's a great question. You may have stumped me. I mean, does it? I know that it keeps people coming back, and it keeps them training, and they like it, and they want spiritual food. People now, alternative religions are growing faster than established religions nowadays. For a reason, I think there's we're in kind of a situation where the spiritual but not religious crowd is growing dramatically. And people want that food. I think it's a great way to keep people coming back to sweat and learn martial arts is to give them the spiritual nourishment that they crave. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Andre Matas. He was a French occultist. He wrote a really good book called Wordsworth's Guide to the Occult. But he said that the transmutation of the religious into the sacred is the very object of the occult sciences, and especially of initiation. And I believe that. I think that people come to the club from all different religious backgrounds, and they're never offended. They always enjoy the training of the symbolism and the way that we address it. And it allows them to breathe sacredness back into the religious aspects of their life that may have fallen fallow, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It allows them to be inspired and to take things back home. Because when you're studying symbols, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you, hey, this is just a symbol that we're going to discuss. What does it mean to you? it's like the Zen thing. You ask a guy a question, or the Socratic method. You ask a guy a question, and you don't answer it. You let him find the answer. Let him find it. Let the awkward silence stretch out. Let him dig, and then he'll find the answer. Maybe that is how we approach martial arts that way. We have guys come out to the club that have experience in other martial arts, and they're like, well, why don't you do it this way? And we say, cool, well, let's put in some mouthpieces. Let's see if it works, And if it works better, we'll do it that way, And so we love questions. We love questions at the club, and maybe that's how Hermeticism feeds into what we do physically, because we approach the fighting stuff the same way we approach the mental stuff. We're like, here's a problem. How do you feel about it? And let's explore it, and let's discuss it. And by the way, we're a pure democracy, so nobody calls me master at the club. Nobody calls me anything other than Mitch. I'm just Mitch, and this guy over here is Charles, and that's Leo, and and that's Bob. I mean, that's how we are at the club, because we don't have gurus. We have friends. So,
well, Mr. Mitchell, let me ask you this: the physical side of what you do, where are you drawing your inspiration from? What martial arts did you find useful? What elements of training do you take the club members through?
Well, we do. We have, like I said, we have 12 symbols, and then we have 12 concentrations. I would say that our concentrations are spread pretty evenly between various types of self-defense, boxing, striking, stand-up grappling, wrestling on the ground, transitions, and so on. But I show the guys the stuff that I know. Some of the guys know more stuff than I know. We all sort of share and share alike. For the most part, I would say that we use boxing. We use traditional Western boxing. We use traditional Western wrestling. Into that, I have put some of the stuff that I learned from Taekwondo in terms of kicking in there. So we probably kick a little bit more than most, and put kickboxing more in our self-defense than most other clubs probably do. Just because we believe that you should keep your eyes up, and you should be prepared for striking, and for 2-on-1s and 3-on-1s and 4-on-1s. So wrestling is something that we do. We want to know so that we can get up and run away, not so that we can grovel on the pavement. So we do a fair amount of kickboxing. So there's that element. I used to train with the Maryland Savate Club. I love Savate. I really would have loved to train more Savate, but there just isn't a Savate club anywhere near me that I could get involved in. And Savate is basically Taekwondo in French. I mean, with boxing gloves on, and you add Western boxing to it. It's a wonderful, wonderful martial art. So we put Savate kicks in there, and I did shoot fighting, so I know my wrestling fairly well. And my son has a really, really nasty cross face that he'd like to show us. So we like to put those things in. And we don't want to talk about my background a lot, but one of the things I did early on after I got out of college is I was actually a security guard. I was a security sergeant for a security company. I spent several years in security. And I know what it's like to be out in the middle of a sea of concrete at 2 o'clock in the morning with a few guys looking at you who really would like to see you not exist. And so, I try not to teach guys stuff that I don't think would be useful to them if they were cold, naked, and alone, in a bad situation. So we try to be realistic. We do borrow a little bit of the Asian stuff. The Asian stuff gets a bad rep sometimes, and I was critical of it when I started branching out from Taekwondo. But some of that stuff makes a lot of sense. The way that the old school sparring, like we used to do, which is basically bare knuckle sparring, but no strikes to the face. There's a lot to be said for that, because we're learning a lot about head trauma now, and it's not a good idea to try to train your brain. The brain don't train. So how the Asian guys train and how I trained back in the 80s still makes a lot of sense, because you can toughen a guy up by fighting, 90% full contact to the body without hitting him in the head, and that'll make a guy tough pretty darn quick. And then the karate hand. I mean, I used to be very disdainful of the classic, karate shuto, knife hand. But, the more that we train, the more useful it becomes, especially if you're wrestling and you're trying to swim out of a hole or something like that. You start to find out that there's a lot of wisdom in that karate hand, and learning to keep your hand in that position and keep that thumb tucked, when you try to intercept a blow, you're trying to make an intercept for an entry into an attack. So we thrown out some of the Asian stuff, but we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, if that makes sense.
Now, do you train in strictly empty hand combatives, or do you work with weapons and all?
Well, we started off doing sticks and knives as well. Over time, we found out that the sticks were not as much of interest to guys. I like can vigny, the vigny can style, which I've practiced for a while. The full contact cane practice. And we did that when we first started. The first 2 years, we also did full contact cane with lacrosse helmets and lacrosse gloves. But we quickly found out that was chasing away a lot of members. There's no polite way to put it except that just really hurts. It just doesn't matter how much equipment you put on, how much pads you put on, unless you have a red man suit. When a guy hits you with a cane the size of your thumb, it just flipping hurts. And to be quite honest, we just done a few years doing it, and only a couple of us really liked it, and we just ditched it because it just was too painful. Some of us still practice with folders, and we've done some live cut training. If you watch our YouTube channel, you see we do some nice stuff. Mainly what we concentrate on is short knives for self-defense, and we typically will have a month or two during the year that we really focus on that, and we try to get guys' feet wet in that. We're not nice experts by any stretch of the imagination, but so many people carry folders that I thought it would be a smart idea to do that. I haven't got any certifications in knife. I just have practiced quite a bit, watching a lot of videos, and me and the other guys train and practicing with knives. And so I don't feel qualified to really teach it, and we don't have it in our curriculum. But we do a little bit, not a lot.
Now, let me ask you, where do you see Cabal Fang going in the future? I know that you've set up a procedure for people if they want to start their own chapters. So tell me a little bit about that, and where do you see the art going?
Well, I'd like for it to grow. I feel like, the guys and I talked about this quite a bit, and we basically just realized that the only way that we can make it grow faster would be to commercialize it, to really open up the secrecy of the trials and so on. So we're really content to let it grow kind of slowly. One of the things I'm doing right now is I'm finishing up the complete curriculum. This book has been 2 years in the making. It's almost there. I hope to be able to get this thing to the formatter and get the cover on it and get it ready to market, by sometime during the first quarter of next year. And this is going to be a full, real live curriculum. This is 130,000 word, 300-page full curriculum from zero to elder in this style. And we're going to do that. And that's not going to reveal all of our secrets, but it's going to answer a lot of the questions. The original book, Cabal Fang book, was just a simple, quick introduction to what we were trying to do. It's a little bit embarrassing now looking back on it that we actually, but that's still out there. It really needs to probably come down. but I'll probably leave it up here for a little bit longer. But the new book will be out soon, and we now have the distance learning program, and we've got a couple people enrolled in that, and they're coming along wonderfully and loving the program. We had several people that were going to try to start orders, but honestly, without the distance learning program to provide them the structure, is just really hard for them. So we're going to do some things to make it a little bit more conducive to spreading, but we're definitely not going to make it easier. I've done a lot of different martial arts over the years, and I have to say that Cabal Fang is one of the most difficult ones there is. And it's difficult because it's different, and it's difficult because the physical training of it, the PE part. I mean, we do 20 minutes of calisthenics at the end of it. My son calls it whiteout calisthenics, but really we do about 20 minutes of calisthenics at the end of each session, and you pretty much can see God at the end of the calisthenics. We like our calisthenics hard, and I have to say, we don't believe. A lot of the guys lift weight and stuff on their own, but we're firm believers in being able to manage your body weight and being able to wrestle, and we should be able to put out hardcore for 20 minutes. That's one of the things that really dissuades people, I think, that just they come out and they go, this is just hard. And no matter how many times you tell them, go slow, do half of the constitutional the first month, they just commit suicide during the PE part, and then they get so sore they don't come back. But we're determined not to make it so easy that it becomes something that we don't want it to be.
Well, very good advice. I mean, it's something very similar to Krav Maga that runs a lot of calisthenics and physicality in every lesson. But, yeah, I mean, good advice to the students. I mean, if you hang in there, you will get the benefit out of it, for sure. Well,
yep, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, Mr. Mitchell, I want to thank you for making time to speak with us. It was great having you on, and I have picked up 2 of the books that you have available. They're basically free. I mean, I think I paid a total of $4 for them to download them. So I want to recommend that everybody listening go and definitely check it out. Where can they pick up the books? Can you share with the audience where they can go to download those?
Yeah, you can actually, if you go to cabalfang.com, there's a resources page that gives you several different links where you can get them. But if you just Google Cabal Fang Manual or the Cabal Fang Manual, they're available it's available for download from BarnesandNoble.com. It's in the iTunes iBook store. You can get it on your phone. Smashwords.com has links. You can download it from there. And if you go to my personal website, remitchelljr.com, I've got a number of links there. But for most people, I think probably on this podcast are probably out there. They probably have most people now have e-readers and stuff, so they're either going to get it through their they're probably going to get through the iBook store or through BarnesandNoble.com or Smashwords.com. We are not on Amazon. I am not a big fan of Amazon for just as a writer and person who likes to write. Not a big fan of the conglomerate, the Amazon conglomerate, so we're not on there. I'm still on the fence. I may put the new book on Amazon. But.
Excellent. And at cabalfang.com, people can also find more information about the distance learning program and about starting a chapter if they're interested in doing that.
They sure can.
Excellent, excellent. Well, sir, again, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. It's been very enlightening, and hopefully we can get you on in the future.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And if you have any other podcasts that involve spiritual aspects of the martial arts, hermeticism, mysticism, that kind of thing, I was more than happy to participate and take part. This is a lot of fun.
Well, absolutely, and that's an invitation that will be waiting for you, absolutely. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Take care.